The night was darker than most, not because the sky lacked stars, but because fear blanketed the people like a weight too heavy to lift. They had come so far. After generations in Egypt, centuries of chains, bricks, lashes, and tears, they were finally free. The plagues had ended. Pharaoh had relented. The people of Israel had packed quickly, leaving behind the land of their oppression and stepping into a journey they had only dreamed of. Freedom, at last. But no one tells you that freedom has a night before the miracle. That just because the chains are off doesn't mean fear disappears. That sometimes the scariest place is not slavery or liberty, but the in-between. And on that night, they stood in the in-between. The Red Sea stretched before them. Impossible, endless, cold and uncrossable. Behind them, in the distance, the rumble of wheels and horses. Pharaoh had changed his mind. Again, his army was coming, fast, and they were trapped. Panic rose like floodwaters. Some shouted at Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" Others wept. Many froze. The wind howled. Children cried. Mothers clutched infants. Fathers looked for escape, but found only waves and cliffs and death on both sides. And Moses, he stood still. He wasn't perfect. He had questioned God before. But in that moment, he raised his voice, not to the people, but to the heavens. And God responded, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff. Stretch out your hand over the sea." But the sea hadn't moved, not yet. And that night, before the waters parted, they had to sit in the silence of not knowing, the terrifying tension between promise and breakthrough. Have you been there? The night before everything shifts. The moment when nothing looks like a miracle is near. The place where God feels quiet, but your enemies feel loud. That was the night before the Red Sea split. And in that space, God was still working. Before we continue, if this moment in the story is resonating with your heart, if you've ever felt like you're standing in the middle of nowhere with the pressure behind you and no way forward, take a moment to like this podcast, share it with someone going through a waiting season, leave a comment about how God met you in the middle of fear, and subscribe for more soul deep storytelling rooted in truth. Your support helps us reach others walking through their own Red Sea night. Let's return. As the people cried and questioned, something else was happening. The angel of the Lord, who had been leading them in a pillar of cloud, moved. He shifted from the front to the back, standing between the Israelites and the Egyptians. And then came darkness, thick, heavy, but also divine. Because that darkness was not abandonment, it was protection. It was God shielding his people from an enemy they weren't meant to fight. All night long, the cloud held the Egyptians back. They couldn't see. They couldn't move forward. And while fear raged in the hearts of the Israelites, heaven was orchestrating a path through the impossible. God told Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea. And he did. A strong east wind began to blow. Not instantly, not loudly, but steadily. Hour by hour, all through the night, the wind pushed and split and carved a dry path where there had only been water. The people didn't know it yet, they couldn't see it. But while they sat in fear, the sea was making way. Sometimes our greatest miracles are prepared in silence. While we cry out, God is already moving. While we worry, he's already winning. That's what the night before the Red Sea split teaches us, that God does some of his best work in the dark. That the delay is not defeat. That the silence is not absence. That the wind is blowing even if we don't hear it yet. Imagine the scene. Mothers trying to calm children. Elders whispering prayers. Soldiers clutching makeshift weapons. And Moses staring at a sea that had never split before, trusting a God who never fails. Faith doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels like waiting in the cold with enemies on your heels and a command to move when nothing has moved yet. But when the sun began to rise, the truth was revealed, a path through the sea, dry ground beneath their feet, walls of water on either side, and a God who had gone before them in power and stayed behind them in protection. They stepped forward, one by one, each step defying logic, each footfall declaring faith. Because when God makes a way, the only thing left for us to do is walk through it. And they did. The people of Israel walked through the Red Sea, not around it, not above it, but through it, surrounded by what should have drowned them, yet untouched by its power. Because when God says, move forward, he's already made sure the ground beneath you is dry, and the Egyptians followed. But what was a path for God's people became a trap for their enemies, because when the last Israelites stepped out and the army of Pharaoh pressed in, the waters returned. What was held back for deliverance was released for justice. And just like that, the threat was gone, washed away, not by Israel's strength, but by God's hand. But let's not forget the night before, because for many of us, that's where we live. We haven't seen the water part yet. We're still standing between pressure and a promise. We hear the army behind us, but we don't see the way forward. And in that place, it's easy to panic, easy to question, easy to think God has forgotten us. But he hasn't. He's moving even when we don't see it. He's defending even when we don't know it. He's preparing a way even when everything feels impossible. The night before the Red Sea split wasn't the end. It was the setup, the precursor to the miracle. The darkness before the dawn of deliverance, and maybe that's where you are. Trapped by circumstances, cornered by pressure, out of options, and yet there's a wind starting to blow. Maybe faint, maybe slow, but steady. And that wind is making a way where there was no way. The same God who split the sea is still moving, still working, still defending, still speaking, even if you don't see the water move yet. So hold on, stay close, trust the voice that tells you to move forward. Because morning is coming, and with it, a miracle. One that doesn't just rescue, but redefines what's possible. The Israelites didn't just escape Egypt, they encountered God's power in a way that would mark them forever. And so will you. This isn't just a rescue story, it's a reminder that what looks like a dead end is often a doorway. That what feels like a delay is preparation. That what sounds like silence is the sound of a miracle in the making. So tonight, if you find yourself on the edge of your own Red Sea with fear behind you and no way ahead, remember the night before. Remember that God moves in the unseen, that wind still blows, that water still parts, and that your job isn't to part the sea, it's to trust the one who can. Your deliverance may already be on its way, so don't let the dark define your faith. Let the promise define your posture. Because the night before the Red Sea split wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning of one. Thank you for listening, and maybe, just maybe, that's the very reason for the wait, because the longer you wait, the more you realize it's not about you pushing through, it's about God pulling you forward. The more impossible it feels, the more undeniable it becomes when he moves. That's the pattern of his power. He brings water from rocks, fire from heaven, walls down with a shout, and seas split with a whisper, all to show that he alone is God. So the next time you face your own Red Sea moment, don't ask, how will I get through this? Ask, what is God showing me in this? Because in the waiting, he teaches. In the silence, he prepares. In the stillness, he strengthens. And when the time is right, when your feet are ready and your heart has learned to trust, He will say, move forward. And you will, not in fear, but in faith. Not alone, but surrounded by his presence. Not unsure, but certain that the God who led you to it is the God who will lead you through it. Because the night before the Red Sea split wasn't a night of abandonment. It was a night of divine setup. A night where the enemy was blinded. A night where the wind began to blow. A night where heaven moved in silence. So don't fear the night. Look for the wind, watch for the shift, and prepare to walk through what once held you back. The waters will part, the way will open, and your story, like theirs, will declare one simple truth. The Lord fights for his people, and he never loses. And when you finally reach the other side, don't forget the night. Don't forget the fear you felt and how it was met with peace. Don't forget the silence and how it was filled with power. Don't forget the wind and how it never stopped blowing, because someone else will one day stand where you stood on the edge of fear, staring at the impossible. And your story will be their reminder that God still parts seas, that nights don't last forever, that deliverance always comes, and that the night before the breakthrough was never the end. It was the beginning of a testimony only he could write.